Hello, and welcome to the Psych and Business Podcast, where we highlight the integration of psychology and psychological principles into the world of business and organizations. I'm your host, Dr. Ernest Wayde. All right, so today I want to take a break out of the Effective Team series that we've been doing, and I want to shift today to talk a little bit about an upcoming series that I'm doing with my guests, and it's on transitioning leaders, and we're going to start that next week. So I want to dive into that a little bit today just to help you understand the reason behind it and what to expect from that series. I think this is a really important topic for a number of reasons, but primarily because a lot of leaders these days are put into the position of leadership because they're excellent or they excel at some technical, functional, clinical, or administrative skill or role that they're in. But unfortunately, most people don't receive the leadership training before they get into that role. And sometimes even when they're in this role, they don't receive the necessary training. And so you have a lot of leaders or newly minted leaders or leaders to be who really have very little understanding, knowledge, or experience in leadership. And so I think it's really important that we try to address that gap as much as we can. I think it's something that organizations need to try to address. I think it's something that individuals need to try to address. But I think it's something that we've seen has a critical impact on the ability of someone to lead and to manage other people. I can't imagine any other role in which you would put someone in this position without giving them the necessary skills and training to do that. But leaders will often find themselves in this position. And I've seen it a lot, and many of our guests who have come on the show and do consulting and leadership development have brought up many, many times. And so I think it's fair to say that this is a pretty common occurrence in the business environment. And so what that means is that we have a lot of leaders who don't really have the knowledge or the skills to lead effectively. So we end up with new leaders who know very little about leading themselves or leading someone else or leading teams of people, and in some cases, leading whole departments and organizations. Now, psychologists may have a bit of an advantage in this area because as psychologists, we're trained in human behavior. And as a leader, you really have to lean into that because you're leading other people. So you have to understand their behavior. And so as psychologists, sometimes we can draw on some of those training and skills. But even in that case, it really takes a while and specific training and experience and expertise to really be able to draw on those insights and use it to help you lead more effectively, to help you be a better leader and better manager. Now, we're lucky in that three of our former guests, specifically Dr. Connie Schroyer, Dr. Marlene Thorn, and Dr. Dee Ramsel, jointly facilitate a leadership development program for psychologists who are transitioning into leadership roles. And they've agreed to walk us through at a very high level some of the concepts and some of the content that they use in their facilitation of this program, because I think it really is applicable to any transitioning leader, whether you're a psychologist or not. I think anybody who is transitioning benefits from these. The concepts are pretty similar, regardless of the specific role that you're in, the specific industry. I mean, leading people is something that can be generalized for the most part pretty broadly. And so I think in this case, it's going to be something that's going to be helpful for transitioning leaders. And really, in some cases, people who have been leading for a long time and just didn't really get that formal training or that formal knowledge to help them understand what leadership really is, what's expected of them, and how they can be really effective in it. So obviously, they won't be able to go into too much great depth in terms of detail because you can only go so far in the 30 minutes or so that we have in an episode. But hopefully this provides a general understanding and really a place to start for people who don't have a lot of knowledge or experience or training in terms of leadership, effective leadership, and leadership development. So we're really very privileged and fortunate to have these great leaders walk us through some primary and some basic concepts that are really needed for leaders who are transitioning into that role anew. So essentially, the program that they do is divided into 3 pieces, and we'll walk through each of those pieces on a weekly basis. Essentially, starting on focusing on the 3 facets of leadership, starting with understanding and leading yourself, and that will be done by Dr. Connie Schroyer. And then the next week, we'll talk about understanding and leading others, which is done by Dr. Marlene Thorn. And then the last week, we'll talk about understanding and leading the business, which is really done by Dr. Dee Ramsel. So just to give you a brief overview of it, starting with leading and understanding yourself, this is an area in which I think there's just not enough focus on in terms of leadership. I think a lot of times we focus on leadership being leading others. And so how do you do that? How do you lead others? But I think there really needs to be a focus on how do you lead yourself first. And so Connie is going to talk a little bit about emotional intelligence, specifically self-awareness and self-management, really making sure that you understand who you are as a person and so what some of your tendencies are. So she'll talk about and highlight the importance of going through the process of self-discovery, understanding your inclinations, your tendencies, really building that better understanding of who you are as a person and how that comes out when you interact with other people. We've talked a lot about self-awareness in one of our individual episodes, so I highly recommend that you dig into that if that's something that you're interested in learning more about. But really, self-awareness is one of those key elements that I think are critical for leaders to really dig into, to really understand who they are themselves. The episode will also talk about the importance of getting feedback when you're trying to understand yourself, to really understand the reputation that you have as a part of self-awareness. So the episode will also talk about leaders understanding the concept of self-management, not just self-understanding. When you understand yourself, how do you manage some of your behaviors and tendencies to make sure that you are bringing out the best of you and what is appropriate for the situation and for the people that you're working in to make sure that you're being an effective leader. Now, the second module done by Marlene really focuses on understanding the roles and responsibilities of a leader and a manager to other people. I think this is really important because we don't always get a clear sense of what is my role as a leader, what is my role as a manager, what are my responsibilities as a leader and a manager, and what are the roles and responsibilities of my team, and what should I expect from them? What can they expect from me, and what should I expect from them? So we'll walk through performance management as well, because I think that's one of the responsibilities of a people manager is to hold your people accountable to performance expectations. But not a lot of people know how to do that or are even comfortable with that. So we'll talk about what it is, what it isn't, how you do it, what is the psychology of motivation behind performance management. We'll talk about all of those things that are appropriate for a leader to know as someone who is leading and managing other people and holding them accountable to specific performance. And then the last module is really about managing the business. And this is going to be Dee Ramsel. As a new leader, a lot of people don't really understand the ins and outs of the business and business management. So it's really going to give us some of that basic information about finances and strategy. A lot of times leaders are put in charge of whole units and departments, and they have to balance a budget, they have to develop strategic plans, and they have to understand the competitive forces. But they don't always understand what these things are and how they impact their ability as a leader of a business or a unit in the organization. So these 3 episodes will hopefully give you a high-level overview of how you understand and manage yourself, manage others, and manage your business. So if this is something that sounds interesting to you, I hope that you will join us in the series starting next week.